Hello and welcome to the Hibs Observer Monday debrief with myself, Liam Bryce, joined by Craig Nisbet, also known as 9125 Analysis. As we build into another week, the return of Hibs at the weekend, but we're going to take a slight detour and look ahead towards the summer. Big summer coming up for Hibs in terms of we're expecting a lot of transition in terms of players, guys potentially leaving. Obviously, we're expecting plenty of signings. So we thought we'd maybe delve into that this Monday evening and just kind of have a look at, with an analytical eye, at what we could perhaps expect from Hibs in the summer transfer market. But Craig, first things first, thank you for joining us. A Hibs-free weekend for you. No game, obviously, to take in. Did you maybe need a weekend off after Fir Park, or do you miss it when there's no game on?
No, I think after that last game and the nature of the last minute-ness of the game and the draw and everything that came with it, and then the statement and everything else, I think having a weekend off was just what we needed.
Yeah, aye. But I suppose the only thing is then you get to sit and stew on that for an extra week. Whereas it's the old football cliche, isn't it? You just want another game, right away to get over it. But we'll see what happens come the weekend. Just before,
maybe not against
sorry, mate.
Johnston.
No,
So
maybe. Well, I don't
Johnston.
know. We shall see. Aye, if it's anything like the last trip to Fir Park, McDermott Park, then you might have a point. Just before we get into it, just a word for our sponsors, as per usual. We're thrilled to have Weissman, a global leader in the boiler industry, known for their top-notch German engineering, and they're sponsoring our podcast and videos. They're teamed up with Scotland's very own award-winning installation team, MPH Boilers, making this a perfect match right here in Scotland. Weissman's boilers are engineered to deliver not just warmth, but unparalleled efficiency and reliability. We're talking about cutting-edge technology that's designed to save you on your energy bills and reduce emissions as well. And with MPH Boilers, you know you're getting service from the best in the business, a local team that's committed to excellence and customer satisfaction. As part of this partnership, when you choose a Weissman boiler installed by MPH Boilers, you'll also get a free internet controller, making it a breeze to manage your heating anytime, anywhere. Plus, they're offering you the first year's service free because it's all about giving you peace of mind and making sure that you're looked after. So if your boiler's showing its age or considering an upgrade, this is your chance to get world-class engineering with local expert service. Weissman and MPH Boilers is a match made in Scotland. Make sure to check them out and take the first step towards a warmer, more efficient home. So, Craig, actually, before we get on to what we can perhaps expect in the summer, I just thought I'd maybe give you a chance to react to the open letter from the Hibs board to the supporters from last week, because if I'm not mistaken, the last time you're on was before that came out. Am I correct?
Yeah.
So just, kind of from, fan perspective, what did you make of, obviously, the decision from the club to, to speak out, first of all, and address, the kind of current situation, and then kind of what was contained in the statement? Obviously, we've got this structural review coming in and aided by the Black Knight FC, which is obviously owned by Bill Foley. And then there was the statement within the statement, if you like, on Nick Montgomery, just a kind of, pretty blunt at the end of the day, that the results aren't good enough and that it now needs to improve. So where do you stand on the statement? What did you make of it all?
Yeah, I mean, I think the club, they're probably in a position where, they're damned if they do and damned if they don't when it comes to putting a statement out like that. I think they could obviously tell there was a lot of unrest, building up to it, and they probably knew, if they didn't get into the top six, they would have to put some kind of communication out. I suppose when discussing it with some of my mates and some other fans, it was one of those things that they didn't really say a lot, from it. And I think some of the things that, going for the review of the footballing department, that is, I think Patrick highlighted actually when you guys were discussing it, that, that took place not very long ago. And that's something they've been through before. And then I suppose the part with the manager, it was good to hear them come out and say, we've obviously said it's unacceptable. he agrees with it. There needs to be an improvement in that, which the fans already knew anyway. I mean, it didn't really give anything else other than that in terms of for next season and direct backing. So I suppose it does leave a bit of a question mark over these next 5 games and maybe what Montgomery has to get from it. I think all fans are now thinking, well, does that mean win 5 out of 5? Does it mean you can win 4 and maybe drop points in another and you'll stay? Is it going to be all tied to performances? I think it still probably leaves a lot of questions open, but it was good to hear something from the club, but I'd probably prefer if there was maybe a bit more detail in it and they were a bit more forthright. But I can understand maybe at this point in the season I'm not wanting to be specific.
Yeah, I suppose if there are still things kind of up in there, I think Patrick actually, as you kind of alluded to there, he summed it up best. It sort of, I think they had to speak out and say something, but it sort of maybe created as many questions as it gave answers.
Yeah.
So obviously that's one. We'll need to see what transpires over the next kind of weeks and months. But obviously a review into the football structure of the club with, a kind of view just to, I think, kind of improving things across the board. And you'd think that, as part of that review, it'll be looked at as recruitment, which we're obviously going to go on and talk about now. Just a wee bit of shameless self-promotion here. I did an article on Hibs Observer's site last week, just kind of trying to summarise, if you like, or preview, not sure exactly what the right word is, just the kind of scale of the rebuild that is facing Hibs this summer. Because obviously there's quite a few loan players in the squad. There's guys out of contract, guys who might be looking to be moved on. I think, and Patrick and I maybe touched on this last week a wee bit as well, because of this, this kind of churn of managers that has happened over the past few years. It's a kind of bit of a patchwork mishmash of different profiles, different players that were signed by different managers who are maybe not, some fit into what the current manager wants to do, some maybe not so much, and it's not an ideal kind of situation. So I just in kind of broad strokes first, mate, how do you kind of see the squad going into the summer? Do you expect, significant changes?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a few players that are out of contract, and ironically, there may be a couple of the players that you would potentially want to hold on to when there is a transition coming and a lot of players being overturned. There's some that we've signed on longer term contracts that who you probably would like to move on in terms of, since they've joined, they've maybe been loaned out. They've maybe looked like they've maybe not been given a fair chance, some would argue, but, genuinely maybe thinking they could be moved on as well, but I'm not sure how easy that is to do in the current market and the current climate. And then obviously the players that we brought in January will probably go back to their parent clubs as well. So I can imagine there is going to be a lot of changes. I suppose the bit I'm really intrigued to see is just how much of an overhaul it actually will be, because I suppose if some of these players come back from their loan and they've still got another year or two on their contract and they're on, reportedly decent money, they might say, well, no, I want to stay. And Montgomery as a person as well, I know, initially when he sort of took Tavares out, for example, from the cold and started to reintegrate him into the team, I wonder if that's his attitude with some of these other players coming back from loan and saying, well, listen, you get a fresh start with me. This is what we're going to do. If he's still there, maybe that'll happen or not. Or if the club will be a bit more like, no, we need to try and start afresh and clear out everybody and go from there. So, yeah, I think there does need to be a lot of changes. I think if we want to play the way that Montgomery wants to play, I'm just unsure how much we'll be able to do in one window. Because I don't think it's easy to sit in the pub and go, I would get rid of him. But actually, it's, there also means you have to be bringing quality in. And I suppose that's one aspect our recruitment over the years we've struggled with that. So I don't know how much I would trust that we'd be able to bring so many in one go and make it work. So yeah, I mean, it's a massive, massive job. And it's like you said at the start of the show, it's a huge summer to get that right, because we have to get it right.
Yeah, aye. It's got to that stage now, as it where it's been transitional almost every summer for quite a few years, and I think there's only so long you can get through that cycle, and it's a bit kind of self-perpetuating as well, with the kind of way things have turned out. Just in terms of, if we can maybe look at it in a wee bit more detail, are there, I mean, I think there are, I think personally that there obviously quite kind of obvious areas that are maybe going to need to be addressed in the summer, but just I'll kind of let you take it from your own perspective. What do you think is going to be the manager's high priority in terms of an area of the pitch that you think that really needs kind of upgraded or just refreshed or a change of profile, just however you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I can hear like the sort of thousands of Hibs fans in my ear now shouting. I think we've got to start at centre back. It's been something for years that we've always talked about the transition and replacing Hanlon and getting a bit more competition and a bit more quality in there. And I think Rocky's had. I think Rocky. I've always been preferred Paul Hanlon ahead of Rocky, to be honest with you. But I have to say, Rocky's, especially in the second half of the season after coming back from the African Cup of Nations, I think he's been very solid and he's progressed really, really well. But obviously, Fish, will potentially return down south, and we still don't know if he would return again on loan. But so I think with that, and then when you've got Harbottle there, who looks like he's probably not going to get a sniff and potentially probably be moved on. It only leaves you Paul Hanlon then, who might end up leaving anyway. So it kind of leaves us really, really short in that centre-back area. And obviously Triantis as well came in, but I think you guys alluded to as well, or you alluded to in your article, that he mostly got played sort of defensive midfield after a while. So I think that's the biggest area that we have to solve. And I suppose linked to that would be the goalkeeper as well, because, Marshall came in and it's maybe not gone as well as people would have hoped, but certainly I do think he does deserve some credit, at the age he's at, to come in and play a sort of different style for him, with playing the ball out from the back and doing that. And he has made some good stops. I know he's not had the greatest of times since he's been here, but I think sometimes, especially with the players with experience, and we've been guilty of doing this in the past, where when they're not good enough anymore, and we've moved them on, and then we've not replaced it with anyone to match up to that, and then we've kind of got a weaker squad by it. So I suppose I would, with Hanlon and Marshall in particular, I probably would approach their contracts with a little bit of caution. Personally, I would probably want them both to get another year, just to see that transition over. Not for Marshall and Hanlon to play necessarily every week, but just having that kind of reliability off the bench and things like that. But I certainly think the area, that the centre half and goalkeeper are probably the main focus, I'd have to say, for going into next season.
Yep, aye. I mean, I thought you were going to say that, but I just didn't want to make any assumptions. They are obviously the two kind of obvious areas, and I think you do have you do make a good point with regards to Marshall and Hanlon as well. And just in a kind of in a sort of broader context, I always feel if there's a team club undergoing a significant summer rebuild as we're anticipating, I do always think it is important to retain a certain level of experience, a certain level of continuity, because too much change, as much as fans maybe want to see change, I think that sort of, as I say, continuity is the word, reliability is the word you use, that just experience, just to kind of transition almost into, the kind of changing of the guard. You kind of need to keep some of these guys around, but I get that it's a balance as well. There might be, I'm just sort of speculating here. It could be, the likes of Paul Hanlon. He's still at an age where he could probably play every week for somebody. It might not be Hibs going forward. Certainly with Nick Montgomery, I don't think it's kind of controversial to say that he's not his first choice. He has preferred Rocky Bashiri, and Hanlon. Again, just speculating, possibly looking at that and thinking, well, how much football am I going to play here if indeed Nick Montgomery stays in charge into next season? So decisions like that. But I do think you make a great point in terms of just trying to retain at least some level of experience. I think you could maybe bring Adam Lafondra into that as well. I know he's not played an awful lot this season, but obviously a lot of that was down to injury. But I think he's the type. I think he's the type with even the appearances that he has had of late. You can see, I think, that he's still got a lot to contribute. Do you find?
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. And then I think striker, that sort of position on the pitch as well, is another quite a big area, because, for Dylan Vente, it's been a bit of a stop-start one, with his injuries and things like that. And he sort of lacking a bit of form. You know, obviously being signed by Lee Johnson, maybe thinking we were going to play a particular way. New manager comes in, we kind of go 4-4-2. He spent a lot of that time sort of just chasing shadows a little bit, you know, working hard, but maybe just not quite getting the sort of support in terms of like the attacking side of things. So, you know, obviously we've got him, but yeah, Lafondra comes into that as well. And I think going back to when you speak to a lot of fans, you go back to this idea like characters in the dressing room and that experience and things like that. And it's probably something we've lacked since, you know, probably the squad from like 2016, 2017 onwards, where that was quite evident we had that. I don't know so much about this group of players, but I always think that you just need to be careful. And probably two names I'd go back to. I mean, this might be a little bit random and people might disagree, but, you know, looking back to when Hibs let go of people like Paul McGinn and then letting go of like Gogic, for example, as well. Two players that when they left, people probably weren't that bothered by, but you've seen that they've went on to have quite consistent careers still and get a lot of game time and be solid players. And maybe they wouldn't have been able to do that at Hibs and maybe not got the game time, but, you know, certainly being part of that squad, I think they would have been useful players. And we went out and tried to sign other players to replace them and probably spent a lot more money and probably hasn't always worked out in those positions in particular. So, yeah, I just think while we're going to go into this big change and potentially want to spend money elsewhere and other areas of the pitch, that if you've got players there who are willing to stay and willing to sort of be part of that transition and maybe not get the game time, because it's a good point you raise. Yeah, somebody like Hanlon could go on and yeah, he could easily go and play more games for another team. I think it's just worth keeping an eye on that and potentially offering a deal there.
Yeah. So in terms of, you know, you've identified centre half as the priority area. What kind of player would you, if you had the money to spend, if you were the manager, and you were out looking for a centre back, what would be the sort of qualities that you'd be looking for that you think that this team needs?
I mean, I think obviously Montgomery, he wants to play it from the back. You know, it's been part of the profile all season, and I think that, for example, somebody like Will Fish, like a young centre half like him coming in, he's developed loads in terms of how he's been able to do that, and quite clearly there's some really good coaching going on there with Montgomery and his team to tease that out of Fish and to get him more confident. You know, thinking about that first game when he was thrown on at right back against Hearts and, you know, how much he struggled, and you look at him now and he does put in these really, really good performances. He's inconsistent because he's a young player, but I think that's obviously going to be part of the fabric and the makeup of how Hibs are going to play. So you're needing somebody that's going to be comfortable on the ball, someone who's going to play forward. But we know from the Scottish League and the physicality of it as well, they have to be able to deal with the physical side of it because they come up against physical players week in, week out. And I do think that, I mean, that it's a hard market to shop in for centre halves like that. You usually will find that you'll get, you know, one aspect to that, and you know, potentially in terms of like maybe the way the aerial duels and tackles and things like that, but might struggle on the ball and vice versa. And then I probably go back to Rocky. You know, I think he's Montgomery. We play a way where we kind of protect Rocky a little bit. He doesn't have to do too much on the ball. It does make us, you know, when you're setting up against Hibs, it's quite easy to go, well, we just let Rocky get the ball and step out and hope that he makes a mistake or there's a turnover. But you can see even he's developed a lot, especially being a right-footed centre-half playing left centre-back as well. So I think they'll be probably looking for the same profiles that they've got in terms of what they've got with Rocky and Fish. But I think the big thing will be trying to get somebody that's got a bit more experience under their belt. Because I think going back through, you know, your article you had about the goals we've lost, and I sort of painstakingly went back and watched a lot of goals we lost as well. There's quite a lot of them that it just comes from kind of this lack of maturity and things like that, and maybe people not taking the game by the scruff of the neck and being clever and all these aspects that come from years and years of playing football. So I do think they'll probably be trying to look for people maybe mid to late 20s, maybe early 30s to come in and sort of fill that position. Which, as I said, it's a tough ask because that's you're shopping in a very, very difficult market for that.
Yeah, an experienced all-rounder centre half that hasn't already been snapped up to a higher level. I think it's you're kind of maybe looking at. I think as you say, that is a hard one to come across because, you know, as I've kind of said there, a defender with experience with all those qualities, it's probably not. You're probably not going to pick one up on the cheap. It's probably a lot of the time it could be, kind of about sacrificing one of those, and thinking in terms of maybe like Montgomery and his coaching team, they might be of the type, and I think you've kind of seen it with Rocky and Fish, that if they can get a centre half with the physical attributes that you need for the Scottish Premiership, with the sort of promise of being able to maybe perhaps improve in terms of in possession, building out from the back, they would probably, I think, back themselves to be able to kind of mould someone. Yep. And it might actually be an easier option than actually going out and finding somebody with all those qualities that fit into the Hibs budget. But yeah, I think I agree. I think a bit of experience is needed in there. It's just you don't have to do any great, in-depth analysis, or as you say, you only need to watch the goals, some of them that have been conceded this season, that you would just think a bit more experience in that back line would go a long way. Because obviously, as you say, Will Fish is a young player. He's going to make mistakes. That's part of his development. I know Rocky's a bit older, but I think just in terms of actual sustained first team experience, he was kind of a wee bit late to that almost, if you like. So he doesn't have that, just kind of back catalogue of loads and loads of games under his belt for the age that he's at, and you can see that he's maybe still developing as a player. Rocky's still maybe got a bit to go, but I do agree that he has improved. I think the coaching team have clearly done a decent job with both of them in terms of getting them to adapt to that style of play. But yeah, just to obviously come back to your original point, I think it's got to be the kind of priority area this summer. And just maybe looking a bit further up the pitch, obviously Mizian Malida has been, kind of revelation since he's come in January. As fans probably dread to think where Hibs might be if it hadn't been for his contributions over the past few months. Obviously, there was a report on the Edinburgh Evening News today that it's Hertha Berlin are looking to move him on this summer, and the kind of perhaps the important detail in there is just if it's another loan that he's going, they'd be reportedly looking for a club to cover the vast majority of his wages, which could be problematic for Hibs. So obviously, I mean, I don't think I need to ask you as a fan whether you would like Mizian to stay, because I think that was a pretty obvious answer there. But again, if he is to move on, as is maybe more likely than not, it probably creates a need for another player in that attacking area, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the other end of the pitch. I actually think in the sort of middle of the park where Newell, I mean, I suppose Amos with his fitness, we'll have to sort of see. It's not been a particularly great start for him, but and Mariah Welsh there, obviously has looked good coming in, but raw, but definitely got that ability in there as well. We're kind of covered in there. I know we've got Kenna coming back and Del Fair coming back from a loan. You might think we might want to add somebody else. Levitt can obviously play in that deeper role as well. So I feel like sort of in the middle of the park and a wee bit further up in that attacking sort of midfield area where, Campbell will still be there. We'll probably get to talking about Emiliano in a little bit, but obviously Levitt can play there as well. So I think we've probably got a decent bit of coverage there, and plus the return of like Harry McCurdy, Ewan Henderson coming back as well. Like there is options there. I'm not saying that they're the best options, but I'm guessing those guys will have to be moved on before we're looking to probably go in and strengthen that area in particular. But yeah, I think for fans, the biggest concern will probably be in the wide areas. Only have it. We've got Ewan, who's had a great season. I know it's sometimes fans get frustrated with him, but he has performed well. And Boyle. But yeah, you dread to think where we'd be without Mizian, and certainly like a player of that caliber and that quality, it'll be impossible to bring somebody like that back in. But certainly we need our focus out in the wide areas, because Tavares has had lots of opportunities. It just doesn't look like it's going to work for him here. And I think certainly by the way we play, if we're playing out from the back and we get into these wide areas, we need players that are going to be able to go 1v1, who are going to be able to run in behind. Because if you don't have that, then you're constantly just going to get the ball turned over. We're going to be wide open, and we're just going to be really, really easy to play against. So I think focusing on those wide areas and giving Boyle and Ewan a bit of competition is really, really important. But again, if we can get somebody with a bit of experience, I think that would also be good, because you can see with Mizian coming in, his experience, and just I think how much that lifted Ewan's performances as well, in my opinion. So I think I'm sure there has been a big focus going into that. I agree with you. I can't see us covering that wage and that money for next season, but I'm hoping the club have been kind of active and are looking at players who have already got sort of like a bit of pedigree about them who can perform. Because I think we can't really take another risk on someone that's not done it at a decent level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I said you touched on it there sort of briefly. Just Emiliano, perhaps in the same boat. Not quite sure what's going to happen there. I mean, he's been maybe a tad inconsistent at times, Emiliano, but I think his quality's not really up for debate. And again, it would be, I think one of the big problems with this team before he arrived was that Montgomery didn't have somebody to be that sort of link between midfield and attack, the sort of out and out number 10. Again, last time he was asked about this was, I think it was before the Scottish Cup game against Rangers. And he didn't rule out keeping either Emiliano or Mizian for a longer period, because obviously, like, as a manager, unless you've been told it's not happening, then why would you rule it out? Do you know what I mean? But he said he's not been kind of asked about it for a while, so we don't know exactly what's going to happen there. But again, it would create an area to replace, because it was so obvious before Emiliano came in, and that the team kind of needed a player of that mould, didn't it?
Yeah, and I'm a big fan. I would agree that he has been quite inconsistent, and it's been a wee bit gutting actually towards the end in those last couple of games, that you wanted him to really get the game by the scruff of the neck and score and create chances, and it just never worked out. But yeah, I think if we go to this sort of like 4-2-3-1, this kind of layout, you need that linking player. Like, you just have to have somebody that's able to link from defence into attack, and he's quite clearly able to do it. He does a lot of things that you maybe don't see, where his movement will pull a player out of position, which will leave it free for maybe Newell or Levitt or Mariah Welsh to slip in a ball to a Mizian or to a Lafondra and things like that. So he does do a lot of that work that's sometimes quite hard to track with stats and things. You probably have to be at the game watching him. The Bournemouth thing helps, obviously helped us get him in. He's obviously got the game time that he would have wanted. I suppose his lack of, setting the form, like in terms of his form, could be the thing that maybe gives us a chance to keep him. I don't know if depending on how the last 5 games go for him, but certainly, we've had Campbell playing there before, McGuinness, we've had, Henderson, we've had lots of players come in and play in that role before, and it's just never really clicked and never really worked out. And I do think for the way Montgomery wants us to play that position, we just have to have somebody that's able to do what Emiliano does.
Yeah, I suppose you never know on that front. I think obviously Montgomery was quite pivotal in bringing him in the first place. There was that sort of face-to-face meeting in Dubai that we found out about after he signed. And I suppose, it's one of those, you've called it there. Like, he has been given an opportunity to come and play and be one of the main men in a team. Off the back of a period where obviously he just didn't play much at all. Obviously came back from injury. I think he might have featured once or twice in the under-23s at Bournemouth, but he was really he was a guy in need of a platform really to go and play. He seems to enjoy it at Hibs. He seems to have I think, you kind of see him doing stuff off the park and stuff like that. He was kind of involved. I think he gave a presentation to the youth team and stuff like that. So it is kind of point to a guy who is liking where he's found himself, even if, maybe results and performances as a whole haven't quite been to what was expected. So, I mean, there is always that element. If, he feels comfortable, he just wants to keep on playing, then I suppose you never know. And I think that's kind of maybe what Montgomery alluded to when he spoke about him, a wee while back. I'd have to go and just reread those quotes. But, as you say, it could be a difficult one, but I think it's a non-negotiable that the team does need a player of that mould, whether it's Emiliano or whether it's somebody else.
I think the big thing, is when we're talking about all these different positions, it's about the wages, and if there's a transfer fee involved, and just, I suppose it's like picking your fantasy team and try to work out where you're going to put your funds in, because we don't really know what the investment's going to be. There's going to be, if we're being realistic here, there's going to be areas that will have to potentially compromise on, and it'll just be which area of the park do we have to compromise on. And you want guys like Emiliano to stay, but if it's going to be too big a wage cut for him and a drop, you might not be able to do it. But then again, maybe the idea of the project that's coming at Hibs and all that's going to be on offer and the opportunity might, because he's 29, isn't he? Turning 30. So he might go, yeah, I fancy this. I'm going to stay. This could be a good move for me. So, but yeah, it'll all just boil down to finances, I think, as well. And as we touched on, just these other players, how many we're able to move on.
Yeah, aye. I know we are speculating to a fair degree, but I mean, that's football, isn't it? So yeah, I mean, I'm expecting kind of big changes, a lot to come over the next few weeks and months. But I think for now, we'll just park it there for today. Thank you, as always, for joining us. And before we let you all go, I just want to plug our current offer. We're running a spring sale, as we're calling it, on the Hibs Observer. You can get 6 months of our content for just £1. So that gets you access to all our pre- and post-match content, exclusive interviews and features. Just last week, our editor, Patrick McPartlin, was over in Dublin interviewing Pat Fenlon. Exclusive interview there, only on the Hibs Observer. You can read that on our website. On top of that, you get tactical analysis from the likes of myself and from Craig as well. Some really excellent contributions to the website that are worth checking out. Obviously, we'll get these regular video content as well. And if you don't mind, I would ask you, could you just hit that subscribe button for us? That really makes a difference to us to be able to keep doing these videos, and it is very much appreciated. But yeah, as I said, that is all from us today. Thank you very much, Craig, for joining us as always, and we will catch you again next time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.